Hello and welcome to Soul Talk. This is Leora Mandel with Rabbi David Aaron. Rabbi Aaron, today I have a very big question for you. In fact, it's such a big question that I think it has been dealt with a lot in books, in lectures, and at the end of the day, I think it's an answer that only God knows. And yet, as human beings, we struggle with big questions, and I think we do need to be able to ask rabbis for answers to some of these big questions. So, my big question is, why do bad things happen to good people? I know that's the classic way of framing the question, but just breaking it down a bit, there's tough things happen to all of us. No one goes through life without challenges, and yet sometimes it seems as though certain people seem to get, I guess, what I would call more than their fair share of the challenges, harder challenges, more devastating challenges. And how do we understand, especially, I think there's a part of us as human beings, we recognize if a person makes a poor choice, there could be poor consequences. But when we have good people that are trying to make good choices, or even if we all make mistakes, but why do some people have to go through so much pain?
First of all, thank you for the question. I take it as a compliment. It's a sign that you think I'm Mashiach, the Messiah, you think I could answer this question. You know, this question was asked by Moses, why do the righteous suffer? And he didn't get an answer. So I'm not going to pretend I have an answer, but I think I actually heard a beautiful lecture by Rabbi Abram Twersky, may his memory be blessed, and it was called The Jewish Response to Suffering. And he basically started off his lecture saying, you all probably came expecting to get a response to suffering, but I don't have a response to suffering, a Jewish response, but I can look at it and put some perspective on it, how to cope with it, or maybe how to cope with not knowing the answer. And I think the first thing I think we really need to appreciate is that the infinite wisdom that this world is created with is something that is so unbelievable and overwhelming and incomprehensible. There was a scientist by the name of Wheeler, John Wheeler, who said, what's most incomprehensible about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And so there are things in the universe that are comprehensible, but that itself is incomprehensible, that certain things even make sense. But when a person begins to look at how vast this universe is and how much clearly it is a manifestation of infinite wisdom, then we have to humble ourselves when we look at our lives and take a bit of a step back in our expecting to understand God's plans and realize that as much as I don't understand why good things happen, I don't understand why bad things happen. I met a fellow, philanthropic fellow in Toronto, and he embraced Judaism later on in his life. And he said, you know what changed in my life is most people, they embrace religion because something bad happened to them. And so when something bad happens to them, they say, why me, God? So, but I had a fabulous life. I have a fabulous life. I'm successful. I've got a great marriage, great kids. And it hit me one day, why am I not asking the question, why me, God? And so it's kind of unfair that when bad things happen, we say, why me, God? But when good things happen, we don't ask, why me, God? And very often we don't understand the good things, why good things happen to good people, that we also don't completely grasp. But to give it some perspective, I like using metaphors. It helps take deep ideas and offer them in an accessible way, but without the intention of simplifying this. But imagine you're a seed and you don't know you're a seed. And of course, what's the fate of a seed? A farmer buries the seed. Now imagine you're a seed, you don't know you're a seed, and a farmer buries you alive. I mean, from your perspective, there could be nothing more demonic and cruel than that. Just kill me, bury me alive, and then on top of it, throw water and manure all over me. Like what is all, and from the seed's point of view, he is definitely dying. There is no question in his mind that he is disintegrating the ground, and this is death, and this is horror. But we know that this seed that is disintegrating the ground is actually beginning to grow, and it's starting to blossom and sprout. And what appears to be death is the beginning of a new life. And so if someone were trying to explain to that seed that actually this farmer was not cruel and mean, actually this farmer was burying you as an act of kindness to allow you to reach new blossoms and new vistas of growth and potential and actualization. You never believe them. It's just not, it's not comprehensible. And so the standard attitude of Judaism is whatever we're going through is always in our best interest, and nothing's happening to us. It's always happening for us. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying this is easy for me too. I've gone through some really heavy stuff in the last number of years, and but this is the attitude, and I think it's the most empowering attitude to remind yourself there's purpose, there's a plan, and there's a divine mind that has the infinite wisdom that made my fingers, my eyeballs, my kidneys. And so I think it's reasonable to assume and patiently wait to see how all this is of the best and will generate tremendous blessings in my life.
Wow. Okay, that I have to say that's a hard question to answer, and I think you really gave it quite an answer. That metaphor is very powerful because I think if you shared the idea without the metaphor, it would be harder for me to really see that concept. It would be sort of in my head and I can sort of hear it, but it's hard to really get it. That metaphor is very powerful. But as you were sharing the metaphor, I was thinking this, when it comes to bad things happening to good people or the challenges that we have to face sometimes, not understanding why, it's hard for me, and I'm sure many of us, to swallow and comprehend, and humility is necessary, so that's an important reminder. But there's other aspects of life that I think we do get, that sometimes something feels uncomfortable, but there's something good coming from it. I think if a person goes through a surgery and when they're recovering, they don't think of the pain as I'm dying. They think, oh, this is the pain of healing and recovery. But yes, the process might be challenging, but I'm going to be stronger after this. Or sometimes a person will take a bitter tonic. It could even be an herbal remedy of some sort that just happens to be bitter, but it's so that they can be at stronger health. And we get the bitter taste is actually in the greater good. Or I was thinking, just quickly, these are some examples. I was thinking when one exercises, if you don't want it to hurt, but if you don't sweat and you're not putting in that effort, you're not doing that much. So also, I'm thinking there are other examples in the world where we do recognize this, but when it comes to, again, the bigger picture and God, without that metaphor, it really is hard for me to still wrap my head around it.
Well, it is still hard, and nobody likes pain. But one of the points that Rabbi Twersky made in his talk is he turned to the audience and he said, let me just ask you a question. How many people here can remember a joyous occasion, a joyous event in their life that generated exceptional growth in their life, and almost nobody put up their hand? And he says, let me ask you another question. How many people here encountered a very painful event in their life, and that generated exceptional growth in their life, and many people put up their hand? He says, look, I don't understand the ways of God, but one thing we see here is that people grow through pain. Maybe that gives us a little bit patience and a little bit confidence that what we're going through has meaning. But at the very least, to remind ourselves, as painful as this is, there's purpose to this pain. I'm sure I shared the story many times before, but when my wife was giving birth to our first child and we went to learn how to do it, I'm supposed to help her. We went to Lamaze, and I'm going to help her breathe and calm her down. But when we got into the birthing room, I was freaking out, and in the end, I asked for an epidural. I mean, it was really quite overwhelming for me to see the woman of my life in so much pain. And in the middle of the most intense contractions, my wife comes out of a contraction with perfect calm. She looks at me and says, hey, could you calm down? And I said, yeah, and I didn't know what to do with that. She was so calm. And then she went back into another very painful contraction, and she came out of that. And she said, I might be in excruciating pain, but I'm not suffering. At that point, another excruciating, painful contraction hit her. And then she came out of that. She said, suffering is pain without purpose. This is the most purposeful pain I could ever hope to have. And that's when I realized that pain without purpose is suffering, but pain with purpose is power. And we have to find purpose. We have to give purpose to the pain that we're going through, even if we use the pain to be more empathetic to help others in their pain. But whatever it is, try and find some purpose. People, when they go through some pain, they say, why me, God? Why is this happening to me? But I don't know anybody that ever got that answer. And I think we probably would be better off asking the question, not why is this happening to me, but what is this that's happening to me asking of me? And try and go into growth mode as much as possible to help you cope with what you're going through.
As you're sharing this, I'm realizing that we have to actually this is such an important conversation because look, life has ups and downs, like the heartbeat goes up and down. And so there's times where life is calmer, there's times where we're feeling more pressed. But I'm realizing that if we're not in the right mind space when we're going through that pain, I'm in awe of your wife, I have to say, with her perspective she had through those contractions, then we can actually miss the potential that could come out of that pain. Because as you were just sharing now, is that pain, if we have meaning to it, it can be power. Thinking of it, pain is a certain energy in our body, and we can get stuck in it, or we can recognize it as this energy, as your wife did too during those contractions, and recognize there's a power. If we could be in that mind space through all the pain we go through, it's power.
I once heard it put very well that, often pain is not our choice, but suffering is always our choice because the suffering is the meaning or or really to be more correct, the lack of meaning that we don't give to our pain. And so pain is there. Now the question is, what's the story I tell myself about this pain? And if I tell myself that there's no meaning to this pain and there's no benefit in this pain and I'm just a victim of bad luck, that just turns it into suffering and it doesn't get us through the pain.
And what you're sharing is powerful because I think when we're in pain, oftentimes we feel so powerless. And I feel like with every challenging emotion, let's say I think of an anxiety, for example, there's the anxiety and then there's my anxiety about my anxiety. So I think it would be the truth about pain too. There's, if you can call it, I mean, pain is very subjective, but there's the pain and then there's the perspective I have about the pain can be its own pain, which could make the suffering greater. And I can alleviate that. Maybe I can't change the painful situation, but the perspective that as you're sharing that I have about that pain can make the difference of if I'm adding pain to the pain through my story or if I'm adding power to the pain through my story.
Right. One of the things I've noticed is people to sometimes handle their pain, compare their pain to somebody else who's in greater pain. And then they start feeling guilty. Who am I to feel so bad when it's not that? I'm not going through that. And I feel that's really unfair to ourselves. It's like a person that has a paper cut and they say, it's not a valid pain. It's not a heart attack, but it does hurt. And I think people have to give themselves permission to hurt and feel that pain and not feel bad about the fact that they feel bad, because that just makes it worse. And so everybody in their own pain, everybody in their own challenge, and we have tremendous empathy and compassion for people that are going through, pain that's greater than ours, but we shouldn't feel that our pain is invalid and our pain is valid. And I think trying to deny that you're in pain only makes it more painful.
It's such an important point you're making, and I would almost imagine that should be the first step because if we're not going to acknowledge that we're in pain, oftentimes what you resist persists. So there's an aspect of if I say I shouldn't feel this way or this isn't so bad, I just need to man or woman up. But the reality is no, accept that I'm in pain. But now what am I going to tell myself about it? What am I going to do with it? How can I become a better person? How can I make this meaningful in some way? Then that's the next step. But that's a very important point you're making about that first step of acknowledge you're in pain. And it doesn't matter that your pain, where the scale is. For me, it's affecting me. So therefore, now the next question, which I love, is what am I going to do to channel this?
I love the story about Audubon, who's the founder of the Audubon Animal Society for being humane to animals. The story is when he was a little child, he saw a cocoon. He saw a caterpillar in a cocoon, and it was trying to break out. It was now becoming a butterfly. It was trying to break out of the cocoon. It was trying to get through this little hole. And he was a little boy, and he saw that this fresh new butterfly was going through tremendous pain to get through the little hole. So to help the butterfly not go through so much pain, he cut a little bit around the hole so it would be easier for the butterfly to get out. But when the butterfly did get out, its wings were deformed. And that's when he realized that that painful little hole that butterfly needed to get through was how he built his wings to fly. And I find that to be a very powerful metaphor also, that if a person understands that whatever they're going through, as painful as it is, maybe what God is doing is building your wings to fly.
Wow, what another amazing metaphor and perspective. And as you're sharing that, I'm thinking it's true. Each one of us, wherever, whatever point we're at in our life, I am who I am through because of all the experiences I've gone through and how I've responded to them. And I'm thinking again, and another example is maybe I could be a great runner, or maybe I could be a great pianist, but if I don't put the effort in, there's a different kind of pain. But if I don't put the effort in, that potential won't come out. And there is, you said earlier on that when Rabbi Tursky asked who has gotten the greatest growth experience, was it through positive experiences or through challenges? And most people have to admit it's through challenging experiences. And in a sense, it really is giving a certain perspective of there's a lot of potential in all of us. And sometimes, I'm not saying all experiences, but definitely there's some experiences I can think of in my life where I realize it's true. There's certain parts of who I am that wouldn't have developed to the version of where I am today had I not gone through some of these challenges. And it's something I don't know if I've ever quite thought of it that way before, but there's a lot of truth to that.
Look, in my own life, I got engaged in my early 20s to a woman, and it ended up in a very, very painful way. She broke it off, and I was crushed for months and months and months. And at the time, it was just so incredibly painful. But looking back at it all, now that, I'm married already over 40 years, I realized that all the brokenness of my heart was how it was prepared to really know what it meant to find love in my life and who would be the right love in my life. And so, sometimes it takes 2020 hindsight to look back at it all and realize that all that pain was actually enabling me to have great blessing in my life.
That's a very powerful story. And I think we've all experienced times in our life where it's only later that we can look back and see the important purpose that some of the pain we've gone through, what it was for. And for the things that we don't understand, one day we will. And I'll tell my kids sometimes these topics will come up. I'll say, I don't understand because I'm limited and God is unlimited and He knows. One day I will know, but I'm not in a rush to find out because my assumption is that we'll have total clarity once we're no longer here. But part of living as the human condition is that we do not understand. It goes back to what you first shared, humility, understanding that I can't understand everything. I'm limited in my capacity to really understand God's vast universe and His ways and the design and purpose of everything.
Look, I heard it once put very well, if I could understand God, how great could He be? If God is really infinitely great, then how would I and why would I expect that the infinite greatness of God could be comprehended by my little puny brain?
And I guess then, in a sense, you're giving me another thought that every time I can't comprehend God, I can either just make God small and say, well, either there isn't God or God doesn't know what He's doing or any of the thoughts we might have, or I can just use that as an example of, wow, God is so beyond my comprehension. God is so great and so vast. And I like that you brought the example of the design of the universe because that's another example of something I just can't comprehend. The more I look into it, the more dizzying it is. You think that in one tiny, tiny grain of sand, there's so many atoms that could fill the whole beach. And it's just, you start to go into the design of God's creation, and it's mind boggling. So, just like on the technical design of God's creation, there's so many plans within God's creation that really is just beyond our comprehension. But again, the important point you made is that we grow through challenges, and part of the pain or power really will depend on our perspective. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that I asked you this question, because it's such a powerful perspective you're sharing, really life changing. Really, I think instead of feeling like pain can totally take the wind out of our sails, we can recognize that pain also can be very empowering, but having the right perspective and going through the pain instead of having the pain overpower us can make all the difference with this understanding. I want to thank you for joining us, Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.